right. Okay. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Beer and Board Games Meet the Guests. I am joined by the man of a million voices, Jason Stevens. How you doing?
I'm well, Mitchell. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So yeah, basically I have a few questions here. We're going to go through them. Number one is the most important question for all my guests. How are you holding up? How are things?
Oh, wow. Well, hold on a second. You asked that just as my doorbell alarm went off for some reason. Someone is at my front door. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Um, how am I holding up? I'm holding up in the way that, like, when someone comes to your door at 7:30 at night, you're like, what is it who is this and what do they want?
Who died?
Exactly. I'm so sorry about this, Mitchell. This
No,
is
no.
actually pretty rare that anyone comes to my door, so I want to make sure that it's not like the entire fire department or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want any trouble.
Do you have a ring bell or
Yeah.
something like that? Yeah, us too.
Yeah. Oh man, it's the coffee guy. Oh man, I completely forgot to do that. Crap. I have a friend of mine is a coffee roaster in
Okay.
town, and uh, he's been doing like home deliveries for coffee.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, I'll just leave a check for you and you can just drop it off. And this is like the second time I've done that to him, where I've said, I'll have a check for you, and then I don't have a check for him.
Do you need to run off and do that real quick?
I don't think so. I think I'm kind of my wife Chris is in the house, and so
Kids are asleep?
well, if they were, they might not be now. I don't know. So let me just take a quick peek at this.
Yeah,
My I have two kids, five. My daughter's 5, and my son is 7.
Odin's 7, right?
Yeah, and so Odin was having trouble sleeping tonight because he saw some footage of somebody playing a video game that unnerved him. So yeah,
What game was it?
Red Dead Redemption 2.
Okay, yeah. At that age, that's quite a
It's a
lot to
little.
see.
7 years old is a little, but we've been watching Jack Black's YouTube channel, Jablinski.
Oh yeah, Jablinski Games.
Yeah, and so we'll just watch like a little bit. You know, he usually does some fun stuff before he gets into the video game stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I try to enjoy things with my son that I think he'll like, but won't give him nightmares.
Yeah.
It's tough.
My dad's very straight-laced, so if anyone were to give the other nightmares, it would be me giving him nightmares.
Yeah.
So
That's the way it should be.
I wasn't allowed to play any video games with guns involved in them in my childhood. My buddies had GoldenEye on N64, so I would have to go over to their house to play it.
Mm-hmm.
My like, Dad, can I have this game? He's like, absolutely not. No shooting games in this house.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, I guess I grew up on Atari 2600 was the first, you know,
Right.
console that I had. My older brothers bought it when I was probably 7. And one of the games that they had was called Outlaw. And it was essentially
Is that the one where you shoot the TV with the controller?
No, there was no light gun or anything back then, but it was all like joystick and button, right? And so you're
Right.
moving these 2 stick figures around on the screen, and you move them, and then they fire at each other.
Right.
And there was like a cactus and some other debris that you could hit with these blocky bullets. But that was our shooting game back then. Was Outlaw.
And your parents were like, those blocks could be people, you know?
Well, my dad was my dad was he was a Vietnam vet.
Okay.
And he grew up in a time where you know, like he saw all the cowboy movies, the westerns, you know.
Oh
So
yeah.
so it was a different time. He didn't give a shit about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I swear on
Oh
that?
yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Uh, after the fact, I did.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Yeah, so there was this period where like he kind of didn't care what I was exposed to or watching. You know, he'd watch like Monty Python's Flying Circus,
Oh, love
and
it.
that would be like 10 o'clock at night on PBS. and I'd try to stay up and watch it, but he'd get really weird about me watching it with him because he
Yeah.
knew that there was stuff in there that would confuse me at a
Yeah,
young
I
age.
get that.
Yeah,
My dad
but
was
he
weird with
didn't.
that stuff. I
Yeah,
got
he didn't.
introduced to all that very, very early. Like, I'm
Mhm.
from a Jewish family, and Mel Brooks gets introduced into your canon at a very young age.
Yeah.
Like, I saw Blazing Saddles for the first time when I was 7 years old.
Oh, that's it. And you got to wrap your head around a lot of big stuff in
Oh
that
my
movie.
God.
Yeah.
I remember I did the quote, like, nobody moves or the guy gets it. And luckily we were in a hotel room and my dad like gave me the sit down talk. It was like, we don't use that word. I know you saw it in the movie. I know it was funny, but that's a word we don't use.
Yeah. Context is so hard to describe and give to a child.
Oh my God. Especially if you tell them not to say something and they're like, oh,
Oh
you
yeah.
mean this?
Oh yeah. My 5-year-old or my daughter is every once in a while something will happen and she'll go, oh shit. And then I will say, excuse me? And she will say, oh shoot. And I'll say, there you go. Good job. That's it.
See,
That's all you can
I'm
do.
I'm worried about parenthood because I just like that would make me laugh so hard that I would have trouble enforcing those types of things because they're like, well, I made daddy laugh when I said it, so
Yeah,
I'm just gonna keep doing it.
there's something to that. I want my kids to not be afraid of words, like
Yeah,
I want them to understand that words have meaning and they have weight and there's purpose. But I mean, you know, context is everything.
yeah,
And what is your intent behind those words? Is your intent you dropped your toast on the floor and butter side down? Yeah. Oh
yeah,
shit is right. That's fine. Don't say it at school when there's finally in-person school again, or you'll
yeah,
get, sent to the principal's office.
exactly. Plus, when you grow up with a fear of something, you end up understanding it less.
Yeah.
So
There's
as you get older, you start to like avoid certain situations because of certain things that don't really need avoiding. You don't need to avoid people who curse more than others because you can acknowledge that that's just the way that they talk. That's the way they were brought up. I don't need to disassociate from certain people for talking a certain way.
right. And when I was a kid, my dad worked outside of the home. My mom worked in the home. She like was a seamstress, made drapes and that sort of thing. But she was always there. And so she was the one who had to deal with me swearing. My brothers would teach me various words and phrases.
Yeah,
I would use them. And especially, I didn't know the context, I didn't understand what those things meant.
right.
So I was freer with using them because they were just nonsense words to me.
Yeah.
But we did. My mom did the whole bar of soap in the mouth business, and
Oh my goodness.
that didn't work out very well.
No.
No, there's many seasons of beer and board games that prove that didn't work.
Oh my God. So you have two brothers, correct?
I have two older brothers.
Two
Yeah,
older brothers. What are their names?
Doug and Mark.
Doug and Mark. So I know as a kid, your goal in life was to make your brothers laugh and briefly to be a rock star. Um,
Very
and
short. Yeah.
and I know that eventually you ended up working at Comedy Sports. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your journey from the clown of the family to trying to make people laugh or making people laugh professionally.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. So my brothers are 5 and 6 years older than me, respectively. So when I came along as the baby of the family, I'm sure there was some resentment there. I mean, a 5 and a 6-year-old having to kind of take care of themselves while mom takes care of the baby. Yeah, there's going to be a little resentment. So I sort of had to earn my way, earn my keep, to be around them and their friends. And so yeah, I started doing like little characters, and I made up some characters and some voices that I would do to make them laugh. And it irritated my dad to no end that I was always doing voices. And he would get really mad. He would like clench his jaws, like, God damn it, no more voices. And so I didn't stop. I just kind of kept doing them. But through elementary school, I went to Ridgeway Elementary School, which was a really small town school, and there were 12 kids in each of the grade classes that I was in. So they combined our class with the class behind us. So in our classroom, it was like fourth grade and third grade, and there were about 12 to 15 kids in each of those complete
Oh
grades.
wow.
Yeah, so we all kind of shared one room. So it was a unique experience because as an elementary school kid, like I knew everybody in the school. We just knew everybody, and so you kind of had, maybe you had a bit of a reputation if your older brothers had already gone through, if they were funny or if they were into
Yeah.
sports or whatever. But by the time I got to seventh and eighth grade, we moved from Ridgeway to Dodgeville. And Dodgeville to me was like, wow, big city. It's like we're going from a tiny town where there's 12 kids in third grade to a school where there's, 90 to 100 kids in a grade, which I understand in a larger community is nothing. But
Right.
for me, that was like, wow. And I'm the new kid in seventh grade, eighth grade. Nobody liked me. And so that meant I had to try harder. And then I realized that trying harder wasn't the secret.
No, it's not.
It
I learned that
was
too.
just knowing when to try and when to just shut up and
Yeah.
stay out of the way. And I think I learned that by about the end of junior year in high school. I finally
Better
started
better
to,
late than never, right?
yeah, I started to realize like, hey, just because you think it doesn't mean you have to say it. You can kind of keep them under your tongue. And so I did that. Went into radio school. I lived in Kenosha, Wisconsin for a couple of years. And they're in the news now, of course. Uh,
Unfortunately.
but I lived in Kenosha for 2 years, and I went to Gateway Technical College, and I studied radio broadcasting there. Um, my experience, my opinion of Kenosha, a white collar town in decline. Uh, when I was there from '92 to '94, they had just closed the big AMC plant in town, and
Ooh.
you had a lot of people who were dependent, a lot of union families and stuff, dependent on those jobs, and so there was a lot of people. There were a lot of people in Kenosha that just seemed angry, and that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm sure things have changed a lot there, but uh, the the radio thing didn't pan out for me. I mean, it did. I was in radio until 2012.
You did mention on Beer and Board Games that you got fired from your job.
Yeah, that was really like a major turning point for me in my life in general. Um, beer and board games is sort of like that's when everything good started to happen. I think
That's
for
really
me.
nice to hear.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned comedy sports. So I was working in radio from 1994 to 97 in small towns. And then I moved to Madison, got a job at a radio station in Madison, and worked at that same radio station more or less from 97 to 2012. But in 2001, I tried my hand at stand-up comedy at the comedy club in Madison on State Street, and I did some like open mics. Back then weren't as popular, but I did like hosting and things like that, and I worked up like a decent 10 minutes. And then I went to see Comedy Sports, which at that time it still is a nationally franchised improv company.
I think Jason Sudeikis got to start a comedy sports, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah. There have been a handful, and sometimes people will start at Comedy Sports, and then it snowballs, and then they're Second City, IO, wherever they land. But I realized like, wow, this is wonderful, and this is all these people they're like me, and so I finally found my people. In 2001, I finally found the people that were like me, and up until that point, it had been just kind of like wandering aimlessly, picking up friends here and there and being like, after a couple of years, like, God, you're a shitty friend. You
Yeah.
don't understand me. I don't understand you. Get out of here.
It's so
So,
hard making friends like after college or after high
yeah,
school because it's like you're not forced in a situation with people anymore.
Hmm.
So you kind of have to go out and be like, hey, you have your own thing going on. Use some of your free time and spend it with me. Like you have to convince them, as
Yeah,
opposed to like living, in proximity or walking
yeah.
home together.
That was the thing too about improv, because a lot of people had just moved there to Madison to go to college, and so I was in my late 20s. A lot of the other people in the group were in college, and so in a way that was really wonderful because I got to kind of start over as kind of like a 21, 22-year-old guy, uh, rolled back a few years off my age, and found that, wow, these folks, everybody's just sort of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
um, and then after a couple of years, Comedy Sports Madison kind of imploded. I split off and started Monkey Business Institute with Brad Knight.
That was actually going to be my question, because I saw you mentioned that after Comedy Sports ended, you started your own improv group, and I was curious if that was Monkey Business.
That it is. And initially, it was just me and Brad. The first couple of shows were just he and I, and it was a lot of sort of, we knew what a show should be. A show should be 90 minutes or an hour long or whatever it is, and you have to have a certain flow to it. And I read a lot of books. I researched a lot. We did a lot of trial and error stuff. We were doing shows wherever someone would allow us to be in a room. Um, and then after about 4 years, my first marriage ended, and uh, I sold the company to Brad and another business partner of his, and they ran the company successfully for many years. And then I ended up buying back into it with some other folks, and then selling my way out of it again. So and to this day, like, a majority of my friends are improvisers,
Right.
and most of the people I've called my best and dearest friends are people that I either met through Comedy Sports or met through Monkey Business Institute.
So I was going to ask you, so did you know Brad from Comedy Sports originally, or did you know him from elsewhere?
I knew him from Comedy Sports. He taught my level 1 class. So I didn't know Brad. And I didn't know, Matt or Aaron or any of those other
Were they
folks
there as
before.
well, or did you meet them through Monkey Business?
I met them all through Comedy Sports. So
Okay.
when I joined Comedy Sports or took my first classes, Brad Knight taught those classes. Jess Shuknick and a woman named Jenny Flock, they taught the second level class. Sheila Robertson Sheila Haynes back then, but
Ah,
Sheila was in Comedy Sports. I'm trying to remember some of the other folks. Matt and Aaron were both in Comedy Sports, and a small handful of other people. I think there was only about 10 people in Comedy Sports, 10 to 12, when I joined. And then the folks who had been in there the longest started to sort of trickle off. Some of them moved to LA, some of them moved to New York, and that's about the time it kind of collapsed. Uh,
right.
when we started Monkey Business Institute, then we realized, well, we need talent and we need more people. So then we got, we talked to Matt and Aaron, we talked to Sheila, we talked to the people that had been a part of Comedy Sports, and were able to get them to join us in this new thing. And part of the reason they joined was because we weren't as demanding on their time. Instead of doing 4 shows a weekend and they had to always be available for everything, it was, you give availability, it's 1 show a week, and that was it. So it
And it
worked
seems
out
like that
well.
model's done pretty well, because I mean, a lot of the guests on Beer and Board Games come from Monkey Business. I think for the first few seasons, a majority of them
Yeah,
for
and
Monkey Business Institute was, just a great talent pool of like, well, we don't have a guest for this week. We only have one person. Who else is in Monkey Business? Who's around?
yeah,
And
it's tough because that was about about the time they started expanding to doing 2 shows a week, and then 3 shows, and then 4 shows. So it became, for a time, there was a heck of a conflict, because you had to do Beer and Board Games on a Saturday night or a Friday night, but those were the nights that
right,
were
and those are the
most likely.
nights you
Yeah,
would do. Even before beer and board games, though, you were associated with Blame Society, obviously.
Mhm.
You did things like McCourt's in Session, Bric-a-Brac Theater, John Madden Dungeon Master, Dr. Molly. Can you talk a bit about your experience, how you got involved? Obviously, you met them through comedy sports, but how did you end up being like, hey, you guys are doing something pretty cool. I'd like to be a part of it, or vice versa?
Okay, so I may be wrong about some of the details, and
Memory is a funny thing. Just do your best.
everybody's going to have a thing. So Matt Sloan had been in comedy sports for a while. He had been doing improv at Comedy City in Green Bay in De Pere. And Comedy City was a comedy sports that kind of broke off and did their own thing. And so when Matt came back to Madison, he was living in Madison. He was at Comedy Sports for a short time, but whenever I saw him on stage, I was just so impressed by him doing improv. He was funny, effortlessly funny, and just wonderful at making sure that scenes had what they needed, and he would call stuff out that was funny without being like a hammer, right? Like
Right.
instead of like trying to derail a scene, like he knew what a scene should be instead of just coming in and being funny. And we had jerseys that we had to wear on stage, and his jerseys fit me, and he wasn't around, so I started wearing his jerseys because everybody hung them up in the back. And Aaron Yonda was still doing some shows after Matt left. Um, Benson Gardner had left. He and Aaron, of course, were in comedy sports at the same time too. They'd known each other prior.
Were they doing
And
Splu or Tough at the same time, or was that after comedy
that was
sports?
Fluor Taff, I believe, was mostly before comedy sports, but there's a lot of overlap because what
Right.
happened was after some of those guys left, Aaron and Matt and Brad Knight and a guy named Gabe Gronley, who is now one of the creatives, writers, and I think an associate producer of the Colbert Show.
Okay.
Uh, those four guys and a fifth named Neil Pohl, they were doing sketch comedy, recording sketches, and they had like this little group of guys and they called themselves Sketch Pals. I don't think it was like a promoted name or anything, but it's just like,
Right.
hey, it's just Sketch Pals. And they had asked me, one of them, I don't remember which one, had asked me, hey, yeah, if you want to come by, we'd love to have you join us and do some writing or whatever. And I was kind of naive. I mean, I was almost 30 years old. I was a grown ass man, but I
Right.
still went to the person who was running comedy sports and I said, hey, I kind of want to do this with these guys. They're really cool and I want to hang out with them. And they were like, well, you got a choice to make. You can't do both things. You can only do one of them. And I was like, all right, I'll do comedy sports then. So then it wasn't long after that Blame Society got started proper. And then it was sort of like, oh, okay, cool. Let's do some stuff together. And I had left comedy sports and started my own thing anyway. And there you go. So the universe worked itself out.
Of those projects, Bric-a-Brac was kind of like you were really the star of that. Can you talk a bit about were you involved much in the creative process in terms of the plot, or was that really like Aaron coming up with story, Courtney doing the props, and like do a bunch of voices?
So Celebrity Bric-a-Brac Theater is without a doubt the thing that put me on my career trajectory as a voice actor. And I mean, radio was fine. I did a lot of voices in radio, and I did a lot of advertising stuff, and I wrote a lot of ads and that. But it wasn't until Bric-a-Brac, I believe Matt and Aaron did all the writing, so I had nothing to do with the writing. The props were all, knick-knack, bric-a-brac stuff, little statuettes and stuff that they got from the thrift stores in town. And I remember Matt asking me, like, do you do a Marlon Brando? Or, like he would ask me about these different voices.
Right.
And we narrowed it down, and I would record, and then Aaron would edit, and they would shoot the video, and and then they'd put it all together, and these things came out, and it was like magic. Like all of a
I
sudden,
grew up on those in high school. I love those. I'd show them to all my friends, and they just didn't get it. And I'm like, how are you not? This is hysterical. Why do you not
yeah,
get this?
I know,
Um,
right?
and that was a lot of voices too. You say narrow it down, but there's got to be at least like 10 to 12 voices per episode.
There was a lot, and there was, I riffed a lot, and they recorded a lot more, that didn't make it into the episodes. But at that time, I was also doing a morning show at a country radio station in Madison, and I just didn't think that those two worlds overlapped at all. And especially like the target demographic for celebrity bric-a-brac theater, you as a high school guy were like, I love this, I get it. But your typical like 35-year-old female from the suburbs of Madison who
Right.
she just wants to hear the new Faith Hill song. She doesn't give a shit if I can do a John Madden impression. She doesn't even know who John Madden is, probably. Doesn't care. And so that was what I was kind of up against. And I remember going into work and trying to explain to my bosses, like, look, this has 1 million views on it, or this has, we just released this yesterday and it has like 500,000 views. I'd like to be able to talk about it on the air or do something. It seems like it's kind of a big deal. I don't know. And then after a while, like, I was doing some voices on the radio, and it just didn't feel right. It just didn't. It was sort of like Penn Jillette has a quote that from years and years ago that I really liked, and it was, "You shouldn't ask yourself who's going to get this. You should just do the thing and know that the right people will get it."
Yeah.
And that's a kind of a luxury to have that freedom to just do whatever you want, and that's something that I didn't have in radio, but I had that with Matt and Aaron and Blame Society. Even though I did so little writing, they were the creative force behind it. They laughed when I did things that
Right.
made me laugh. So that was kind of the secret there. And then from there it was, other stuff. One of the things that I would stress out a lot about was I'd get done with recording, I'd get done with something, and I'd be like, oh man, that was just trash. They hate me. They must hate me because that
The
was awful.
imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah, I still get it.
Oh.
But um, that was an interesting time because YouTube was still relatively fresh, and you could still count on the comments to be mostly positive for almost anything that you did.
The trolls hadn't found it quite yet.
Yeah, yeah, but it would still irritate me, if I saw a comment like, "Well, yeah, that's great, John Madden, but Frank Caliendo does it
Oh
better.
Lord.
You should have got Frank Caliendo." Yeah, they should have got Frank Caliendo. That would have been really fun.
Just call him up. Just like
Yeah,
phone in Fox, like, hey, you got this guy on your show. I don't know if you know about him, but
that happened recently again too. I forget exactly what the context was, but somebody had replied to something that Josh Robert Thompson had posted. He's an impressionist and an actor and a stand-up comedian in LA. And Josh Robert Thompson is probably best known for his work on the Craig Ferguson show,
yes.
where he did a ton of
His
awesome
name
stuff.
came up when I was looking you up on YouTube because he does a Morgan Freeman, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he does, and he does it. I mean, there's like Charlie Hopkinson is another guy. He's in the UK. He does a wonderful Morgan Freeman. But we're all different. We all do it our own way, and we all have our own little picadillos that you know. But somebody had commented on his Twitter feed, like he had posted this video of him as Morgan Freeman, like voicing something, and then somebody said, Jay, I love your Morgan Freeman, but I think Jason Stevens does it better. And I was like, oh fuck, don't do that.
Oh
No,
God.
don't do that to him. Don't. And so I was like compelled, the imposter syndrome in me kind of compelled me to say like he doesn't I'm flattered, and also he doesn't need to know that you have that opinion. Like
Right.
I was kind of scolding the guy, like, thanks, I appreciate that you like me and like what I do with my voice, but it's not productive to do that to somebody who's creating things.
It's like if there's someone at school who's like, someone's like, oh man, he's the best basketball player, and then your friend jumps is like, no, my buddy here is the best in school. And like, oh come on, dude, I don't want to do this right now. I just wanted to go home. Now I gotta play basketball with this jerk off.
You got a whole circle of people around you. Fight, fight, fight.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Oh,
people love a good show. People love a good show. They will take any excuse to watch two people duke it out in any capacity.
yeah, yeah. Although, I mean, truth be told, I'd love to do some silly shit with any of those folks who do really great
Of
work.
course, yeah. I mean, you're all kind of in the same field.
That's kind of what I mean. Beer and board games to me has been mostly recreational. It has been my chance to go and hang out with my friends.
Right.
You know, it's an excuse to go and hang out with friends and maybe drink some beers and have some laughs, and which is great because I don't have to edit it and I don't have to produce it and I don't have to deal with any other stuff. But you know,
you get to watch Aaron smiling because everything's chaotic and Matt freaking out because like I have to make sense of this somehow.
Which I think at this point is just muscle memory.
Oh yeah, he's got it down to a science for sure.
I still feel awful after episodes that I'm on. I still have that, no matter how many. It's still that. Oh shit! Oh man, boy, I don't know what he's gonna do with that. That was just hot garbage juice. I did that.
They always manage to do something. There's only a handful of episodes I could even think of where like nothing was really happening. And they'll acknowledge it. They'll apologize to the camera, like, I'm sorry that this show isn't good, folks. Like, we'll try better next time, but this is just not happening.
There's, you know what, and I've watched things like that and just thought this is enjoyable. It's real, and it's not. Nobody's trying to do shit.
So it's honesty.
There was a recent episode. I think it was the last episode that I was on before COVID, and I was on with Craig Benzine, Wheezy Waiter.
Yeah, that was the trailer park episode where you had a little bit too much to drink. You were in charge of the show.
I got really wasted on that, and then made a disaster of the game. I couldn't focus on a damn thing. So I think there was a little bit. I do remember parts of that, so it wasn't like blackout drunk or anything, but there were moments where, as I'm misbehaving, I'm thinking, I wonder if this is good. I wonder if what I'm doing is really helpful here. And then that voice would just kind of turn into like wah wah wah.
Yeah,
like haha, funny, wee.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite appearances of yours because we really got to just see you let loose. And I love when you're on the show because, especially with the role-playing games, because there's a lot of voices that you have that I feel you probably don't get to use as much, and you really get to stretch that out. Like, how often do you get to do Conway Twitty for commercial purposes?
Never.
Or like, never. I mean, Larry the Cable Guy maybe, but like a lot of the voices you do, especially some of the understated ones that like just don't really. Some people like just like a lot of people don't even know who Conway Twitty is.
Right.
So if you tried to offer that as a service, they'd be like, "Why the hell would I want a Conway Twitty voice for anything?"
There was a heartbeat. There was a moment that I thought John Conley, and then I went, nah, he's had 40 number one hits, but John Conley, nobody's gonna know him. I gotta go to Conway Twitty. So,
well, I mean, I feel like at this point, music is probably the thing he's least known for.
Yes, yeah. Conway is kind of, well, and having that whole thing with Family Guy.
That's the only reason most people know him is that Family Guy would just troll their audience by playing 4 minutes of Conway Twitty in the middle of an episode with no explanation as to why.
Yeah. Well,
which infuriated me.
When I was in radio, I was in country radio, and our radio station went to Nashville, and I probably told this story. I was probably drunk when I did, so it's why I'm telling it again. But when I was in radio, I got a chance to interview Conway Twitty's daughters. And, they're like in their 50s at the time of the interview. But I'm interviewing them, and they were just so kind and sweet and nice and real. And there was no way I was going to be shitty about Conway.
Right.
And so I was like, what was he like? Because, I knew his music from, playing it on the radio or whatever. But they were like, oh, he loved to eat. He loved food so much. I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm into Conway now. He loved anything with gravy. Oh my God. So yeah, and then he died on stage. Oof,
Yeah.
not a good
All that gravy.
all that gravy. It gave him a stomach aneurysm.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Uh,
abdominal aneurysm.
So I know you've mentioned your freelance business really took off after the Obama Plays Titanfall
Yeah,
video, if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken.
Mhm.
And you've been on the Tonight Show and I think a couple other night shows before, correct? Or is it
So
mostly the Tonight Show?
yeah, so it's pretty much the Tonight Show was the thing that kind of launched me.
Right.
The Obama Plays Titanfall came out, and I was with my family at someplace in Wisconsin Dells at like an indoor water park thing, and I'm like looking at my phone. I'm like, holy shit, this thing is up! Whoa, this thing is 1 million views on it, and that was like the first big thing, you know.
Right.
And I was like, I got to do something. I got to post this on my website. I got to. Oh my God! But I'm on vacation, and so that was a pretty crazy little freak out that I had. And then after a while, like I looked on my website hits went from nothing to like 100,000 a day
You
because
mentioned
of
it did
that.
wonders for your SEO.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. And then it was sort of snowballed here and there. Like I got an email from the casting director of the Tonight Show one day saying, "Hey, can you do Morgan Freeman? Would you like to do it on the show?" And that's a crazy feeling to know like I've got like 30 minutes. I've got to do this so perfectly that it gets on the air on the Tonight Show tonight. And I'm in my little booth sweating profusely, you know. And then after that, there was one of the early projects that I got. I was contacted by a producer that was making they were making a film trailer for The Martian, and they needed a Ben Affleck sound alike, or not a Ben Affleck sound like
Matt Damon?
Matt Damon sound. And so I remember not knowing what to charge them. Like, I don't know how much that's worth. I don't know anything about this business. And the receptionist, because I called their office, and the receptionist was like, I went to UW Madison. I love Madison. I know where you are. Oh, I'd love to help you. And so she kind of walked me through a few things. And that was when I realized like this is a lucrative business, this voice matching for film trailers thing. And then shortly thereafter, somebody with Jason Mark's talent management contacted me, and they were like, "How come we've never heard of you before? You're really good at this. Can we manage you and send you auditions and things?" So that was kind of where it blew up. I was contacted. I think there was somebody with the Kimmel show that contacted me, but I didn't quite make the cut on that one. Actually have, there's another guy, I know I mentioned Gabe Gronley working for Colbert, but there's another guy, he and his twin brother were in Comedy Sports, sort of the year after I joined Comedy Sports. Asher Perlman and his brother Reuben were in Comedy Sports. Well, Asher now works for Colbert too, and he contacted me a few months ago and asked me if I could do a certain voice, and I don't remember the voice off the top of my head, but it's one that I couldn't do. So it was a bummer because I might have been able to kind of eke into another one. But yeah, so those are kind of the biggest things. I've done some sports stuff. I narrated I think it was 2018 Ironman Championships on NBC on Thanksgiving weekend that year. Yeah, that was sort of a bittersweet deal. That did not go like I wanted it to.
In terms of your performance or in terms of the pay?
Like pretty much the entirety of the thing didn't quite go the way I wanted it to. It's a long story, so I'll condense it down to I'm not always the shrewdest business person. I'm also very agreeable, which
Yeah,
is
that's it
fine.
does not get you very far in business.
No, my philosophy has always been like, well, I'd rather do three jobs than lose all three and not, But the, then getting there and sort of realizing like I am way the fuck out of my depth because like I've got to do this as the show is going, reading the script, timing my lines. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And when I got there, like the production person and the person from NBC Sports who was in the editing bay editing this thing, like the producer, the people from Iron Man, the fucking producer of the thing, like there's four people in the booth, and they spent at least an hour arguing between each other before, and it was like, hey, you got to be here at noon. We're gonna go there at noon. We're gonna record at noon, and it's like 3:30 before they even turn my mic on.
Oh my
So
god.
then I'm like rushed, and they got to cancel my flight and then get me on another flight, and it was a shit show from Jump Street. And so in a way, like the imposter syndrome kicked in, but then also that was gone by the time I was done because I was like, I did the best I fucking could,
Mm.
and y'all didn't give me the right direction anyway. So there you have it. I don't know. Maybe I'll be back. Maybe I won't. But I doubt it. Unless they
Yeah.
want Billy Bob Thornton to MC the Iron Man, which would be fun.
I mean, people do kind of sometimes people will put a lot of the failure on the actor or the voice actor's part, but the direction really is so important because if you're not being told what angle to give, you're really just shooting in the dark because you only know what you're doing. The director knows the whole picture. They know how it's supposed to relate to other pieces. But if they bring you in, they're like, we need you to do this voice for this reason. That's really all you know. You only know what they're telling you.
Yeah,
So if
and
they're all fucked up, then you don't know what's going on and you just kind of have to work with what you got.
yeah, and I think anytime there's been arguing or tension between two different sides of a production crew, it puts the performer in a pretty tough spot because you don't know who to listen to,
Yeah.
and you don't. I didn't understand who was in charge. I still don't know who was in
You
charge.
don't know who, if you piss them off, you're not going to be asked back, things like that.
I didn't have any illusion. So I had already, pardon me, I had already done a an Iron Man. I already narrated an Iron Man video. It was like the 40th year introspective or something. So I'd already done one thing that, as far as I knew, was successful, and that everyone who saw it liked it, who needed to like it. And then to go into a much different situation and feeling like I don't know if anyone is really happy with any part of this. And then like the production guy's like, are you fucking kidding me? I've got to get this done by 6 o'clock. This is 4 days worth of work. And so he's editing, and I'm the least of his problems. That
Right.
was kind of the vibe of the whole thing. Like, I'm the least of everyone's problems here, but I'm kind of in charge of myself, and this is the best I can do, you know.
I've had that in jobs before, like showing up on the first day. And on that first day is when the two owners decide to start bickering. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
someone needs to train me. And they're like, we don't have time for that right now. Like, just get behind the counter and start doing stuff. We have way bigger fish to fry. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, this is a great way to start a job.
Yeah, it doesn't get any better. Like I thought maybe after I was 30 I would start experiencing real grown-up shit, but I'm 45
Some
and
people just never grow up. Like when you're in business with people, especially when you're in business with friends, things can
yeah,
get pretty ugly.
I experienced friend business, and it had remarkable upside, and it also had a fair amount of downside. It's tough to maintain a business with friends because you're friends first.
Money and friends do not mix.
No, and the
Once
thing,
friends start owing each other money and it's like becoming like a thing, not like $20 for lunch,
yeah,
things get really like, I need that money, dude. Like, I
yeah.
can't make a living without this. And you're like, that's way more pressure than two
Mhm.
friends should have, like, with each other.
Yeah. And thankfully, I've made it through all of that stuff. I'm
Do you feel
still,
like leaving monkey business at certain points, do you think that that preserved friendships in any way?
oh yeah, definitely. Well, there was the job of running the company, which, I mean, you felt the pressure of like, got to make sure there's audiences in the seats, got to make sure the audiences get what they want, so they'll come back. Also, got to make sure that everybody's chill enough to make good improv to enjoy each other's company. So it's like truth versus harmony, constant battle. And so I would be sitting on the side of the stage, ready to jump in, and we're doing a show, and I'm like thinking, and I'm hearing like, oh, the DJ's music cues are off. I got to talk to him after the thing. Oh shit, there's something else I got to address, and so you can't be in two places at once mentally, and
Right.
that is the thing about beer and board games and Matt and Aaron, that no one should ever take for granted, that they're running a show and a business at the same time as they're performing, and that's impossible to
Yeah.
do, and yet they've done it for 10 years. I mean, so
Their
that
chemistry is just like, it's unbelievable the way that they like just bounce off of each other.
they
Um,
understand each other really well, and that goes with the time that they've spent together, I think.
so I have a few questions about your your process of impressions in general. So I
Yeah.
know like every voice obviously is different. Do you have a particular technique in terms of research and practice? Like, do you hear a voice and you're like, I think it can do that, or is it more like an aspiration? Like, I like this actor, I wonder if I could work up an impression of them using whatever impressions I already have and kind of like mixing and matching.
It's a good question. So now where I'm at is that I will get an email that will include a clip of an actor. Sometimes I don't even know who the actor is. Sometimes it's just a bit part. Somebody who, maybe 5 years from now they'll be a premier A-list actor. But for now, I get this clip, and it says bartender, and that's my reference, right? I got the bartender. In the clip, they're saying, "You two jackasses, get out of here," and I got to say, the script says, "You two fools, get out of here." So then I have to match his tone, his accent if he has one. I have to try to match his pacing. Try to match if I can, the room tone, or the distance from the mic. That's always the toughest for me, because I'm not an audio engineer, but I'm
Right.
getting better at that. So of all those things, how do I arrive at that? Well, now at this stage, it's sort of just muscle memory. It's that my mouth, my throat, my tongue, everything knows where it needs to be to make certain sounds. And so I can repeat the line and hear it, and I know I got to go higher, got to go lower, got to go, I got to pinch my throat tighter, I got to go more nasal. Like, there's a bunch of stuff. I don't know the words for all of it. There are
Right.
terms for it, but um, what I do when I find one that I really want to get good at and I'm not good at it is usually I'll record or capture or listen to audio of them. Uh, and if they're in a heightened state, like if they're playing a character in a film and they're yelling, or they have like a catchphrase or something that's like really easy to hook on to, that's what I'll start with. Get that phrase down. And then I also make sure that the tone is right. Um, if there's some affectation, like Matthew McConaughey is a great example. When he plays the little koala bear in the movie Sing, he's Buster Moon. He's got this, he's bubbly and he's got a high pitched voice, and he doesn't have a hardly at all a Texas accent. And he certainly isn't, he isn't doing that thing with his S's where he's like half whistling them like he does in the Lincoln commercial. So that's also part of it. Like, once you get good at the baseline of a voice, then you can go into whatever character they're in. You can do those different things. I'm not perfect with McConaughey, but enough that if a line of dialogue came through that I needed to do for a trailer, I'd stand a pretty good chance of landing it. There are there's always somebody else,
Right.
but typically it's repetition. It's having a good ear to know when I'm wrong. It's having a good ear to know what to change to make it righter. And then it's expanding from those catchphrases and getting comfortable just speaking any dialogue, because that's what you need to do with a good impression, is you need to be able to just talk and riff.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want to just be like, well, give me like 5. I have a list of like 10 quotes from them that I can say really well. Like,
Yeah.
well, can you just like try to have a conversation with me? As I'm like, oh no. I
Arnold,
can do the things they say in the movies, but I can't,
yeah.
you know.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is a good example of that, because everybody's got to get to the chopper.
Right.
Everybody's got to, yeah. But it's his, like, we're gonna go out and we're gonna do this thing, and then we're gonna go and have a coffee, and it's his more soft-spoken stuff that's harder for me. There's some voices that I'll never do well. Samuel L. Jackson is one that I will never do well,
Yeah.
because he's a smoker, and, well, former smoker, and he's got this nasal component to his voice, but his voice is really low. His range, his depth is resonant.
Right.
So there's some things there that come into play. Tom Hanks is another one. I just can't do a Tom Hanks impression.
It's like, it's hard to really pinpoint like what he even sounds like unless you're listening to him. It's such a, like with Christopher Walken, he has a very exaggerated type of voice, which is why you can do an impression of it, because it's so distinct that you can recreate it. But with Tom Hanks, it's so distinct that it's almost impossible, because
Yeah,
it's just the structure of his throat. It's just the way that he speaks.
it's easier to do a heightened, more excitable voice. Like Tom Hanks, if I was really going to dig in and try to learn to do a Tom Hanks impression, I would start with, there's no crying in baseball, just to
Right.
get the tone right. And then I'd move on to, more calm and less excitable Tom Hanks. But like Walken, um, there have been a few interviews with him in recent years where he says, like, I don't understand when people are doing impressions of me. I don't hear it. I don't get it. I don't understand. People have to tell me that's what they're doing, and otherwise I won't know. And he did this interview with, I think it was like the Today Show or Good Morning America or something, where he was promoting his new movie 9 Lives with Kevin Spacey, back
Oh,
before Kevin Spacey was removed from the business.
yes.
And Walken is just sitting there, and he's just calmly talking about cats and how much he likes cats and how much cats like him. That's the Christopher Walken that I want to be great at impersonating. Not the, hey, you guys gonna come over there and shoot you in the face with a soldering iron, like
Right.
that is, yeah. But the more like, I have 7 cats and they love me. I feed them sometimes kibble,
Yeah.
the delicate.
Because the height stuff, obviously, that works for the comedy bits that you do. But when you're doing
Yeah,
professional voiceover work, if it's not supposed to be funny, it's just supposed
right.
to be, or the funny part is that it's so on point that it's like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, that is how he would say that.
yeah. And it's a matter of, do you want to be really super accurate at the voice, or are you doing a fun thing that you want to be funny
Right.
at? There's no wrong answer. I mean,
Are there any impressions that you're really proud of that you wish you could do more with, but just don't have any commercial feasibility that you'd like to
Bill,
talk about?
Billy Bob Thornton. Yeah.
Really? I'm
Yeah.
surprised.
So Billy Bob Thornton, this is also a really early on in the TV movie stuff that I was working on. I got contacted by a production company in Europe, and they were like, "Hey, we need you to recut some Billy Bob Thornton dialogue that's in this movie." And again, it was an instance of, oh, I didn't have a manager at the time. I didn't have an agent or anything, so I was like, I don't know how much to charge you. It's in a movie, you say, huh? Okay, well, what's that worth, And so we arrive at a price and everything, and I record the dialogue, And now when I record dialogue like that, I might give like 3 to 6, 7 takes, depending on, I mean, how much variation do you possibly need? Do you just need to match this and switch one word? Maybe it's 3 takes, maybe it's 5 takes. But I remember sending them like a 20-minute file, like, here's all of many possible ways I could have done this.
Oh
And
my
now I
God.
know, like, don't do that to people. Don't do that to the editor. They will not like you.
Yeah, no, they are very time sensitive with that stuff. Like
So,
they
so
they need they need the parts they need, but you know, if you give them too many parts, you're actively wasting more of their time as
mhm.
opposed to making their job easier, which
Yeah,
is
I still probably do that, but for the right reasons. I mean,
right.
but I get done with this thing, and then they're like, "Yeah, we're happy. We're good with it. We're gonna these are gonna be in the movie. These are gonna be in the actual movie. These lines of dialogue that you recut." I'm like, "Oh, that's peculiar. Why didn't you get Billy Bob Thornton to do it?" Well, he didn't. He wasn't. He didn't. He wasn't under contract to do it, so he wouldn't do it. Oh, okay. Well, it turns out the movie was London Fields, or is it London Field? London Fields, I think it is. And it was based on a book, a popular book, um, but the movie itself apparently is horrid. And it's largely because it doesn't translate well to film. Like, I read a bunch of stuff about it. It doesn't translate well to film. It's weird. It doesn't flow right. And then what happened is that the director sued the producers for like $3 million
Oh God.
because they went back and re-edited all of his film. And the producers were the ones who hired me to revoice some of Billy Bob Thornton's lines. And then shortly after that, that film was shown one time at, I don't even remember which film festival. It might have been the Toronto Film Festival. They showed it one showing and then had to pull it because of the lawsuits.
Oh my God.
And it only recently, within the last few years, like, actually came out and it's available to rent or to buy. But I don't know. I've never seen it. I've never like seen if my lines are in it.
It
I don't
doesn't
know.
sound like something that you need to have in your life at this point.
No, and I remember like having to like frantically email back the producers like, why haven't you paid me? I'm angry. Give me my money. And so I wasn't the only one. Like, they didn't. Apparently they didn't.
I imagine a lot of people got screwed over in that deal.
Yeah, that's kind of what I heard. But it's an interesting story. At least it's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Sometimes you just like you gotta think back. I'm like, it was a lot of time,
yeah.
maybe a little bit of money, but did I get a good story out of it?
Yeah, there's another movie that is an indie film coming out or came out recently or something, that I did some voice stuff in. Pardon me. And the I guess the writer or producer of it was in some trouble with the law here because of a film that he had filmed, and one of the assistant camera people was killed, hit by a train.
Oh my God.
And so I got hired, I did the thing, and then like later on in the process, I was like, I'm gonna look that guy up because this seems like a strange story. And I looked it up. I was like, oh my God, this guy, he's like got completely blackballed from Hollywood because of this incident. So you just never know who you're gonna run into on the internet.
Yeah. Are there any impressionists, past or present, that have influenced your work? Do you have any favorites of the past? Any whose work you see now and you're like, oh man, they're really good, or I really like how they do that voice. Maybe I can incorporate that into my voice, or something along those lines.
Yeah, maybe not as much anymore. But Frank Caliendo absolutely influenced my John Madden. I mean, I listened to him doing John Madden and thought it was amazing. And at that time, I was probably only doing 5 to 10 different voices and probably not very well. And then I was listening, and that was one of the ways that I learned how to do impressions, was like Dana Carvey's George W. Bush impression, or George H.W. Bush impression
Yeah.
back then. Uh,
HW.
yeah, not gonna do it, wouldn't be prudent. Like, he doesn't sound like him.
I love that bit so
Um,
much.
and so there's, and I think Matt Sloan has mentioned this before too, because he's very good with his voice. He's very flexible with his voice. And it's like, yeah, you pick up the hooks. They already figured out what makes their John Madden impression good. they already know it's the it's the stammer. So then, yeah, I got to have a stammer in mind. So you listen to them, and then you listen to John Madden, and then you figure out where your voice fits in the scheme of things. I think that one of the first ones I did was Paul Harvey, the old radio announcer guy.
Yeah.
Um, there was nobody else that I knew of doing Paul Harvey impressions, so there was no one to listen to.
I think
But
I remember you mentioning that in your little quasi TED Talk type thing that I found on
oh
YouTube.
yeah, yeah, that was a weird thing too.
Yeah, I got a good about bit of info from you from that, and I was like, oh sweet, needed some deep cuts.
Yeah, yeah, my kids will have no problem like scrounging up information about dad. If something happens to me, I'll always be on the internet.
That's all you could ever dream of at this point in time is like, oh
Yeah.
man, if someone goes on the internet, they will find me so fast. They will
Hmm.
find everything about me
I'm
that
like,
they could
what is
ever
the
want.
appropriate age for my kids to watch beer and board games? Probably mid to late teens, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, I started watching when I was in college, but I started watching Blame Society probably when I was 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, I got started on comedy super young, like Monty Python, Blazing Saddles, all these movies. My dad got me into these super, super young, like 7, 8 years old. I think in part because he was the baby of the family, so his brothers introduced him to all this stuff at young ages, or
Okay.
he had such a fond memory of it that he wanted to introduce me as soon as possible. And me being the first kid, he was like, he had no discretion. He's just like, I'm just gonna
Hmm.
show it to him. Like, I don't
Yeah.
care. Like, I was watching The Frisco Kid when I was 11 years old. I'm like showing it to my friends. I'm like, this is hilarious. They just like didn't get it because I
Yeah,
love Gene Wilder.
that kind of describes me, especially with my son, because I'm always showing him stuff like, oh my God, but without thinking it through, you
Right.
know. Like we sat down and started to watch a little bit of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, like the bit where they approach and there's all the French guys are in the castle. Like that's
Yeah.
funny. I mean, they threw a cow at him. Odin, they threw a cow. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah. But
And then you get to the scene with the nuns where they're
yeah,
like, and then the oral sex.
we didn't get that far. I think in this country we're probably a little too afraid of words and sex.
Yeah.
And but violence and anger and aggression is in everything. It's like sugar, you know. It's
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, we're very concerned about fat, but we'll let sugar take a pass, you
Yeah,
know.
that's one of the big things that, like, I mean, in my diet specifically, I'm like, diabetes runs in my family. You don't get diabetes from eating fatty foods. You get diabetes from
Yeah,
eating sugar.
yeah.
And
And you
it's
know, and if a kid sees a lot of like content where people are shouting at each other and calling each other names and there's a lot of violent reactions to things, it's I don't see the upside to that.
right.
I
Sorry, it's my
see the
dogs.
downside to it. I see what happens when my son watches a lot of slammy shit on TV. He starts
Yeah.
getting that way with his sister. So it's it's better to be in comedy than it is to be in like action drama.
Oh, absolutely. Because there's so much flexibility in comedy because a good action comedy can have that nice balance of action and comedy. It can
Yeah,
be a good action movie and a good comedy movie. You can also have an action movie that has some funny bits in it, but if
yeah,
it's not a straight up comedy, it's not that same balance. It's an action movie
right.
that has a couple funny lines in it.
Yeah, I've been a Jackie Chan fan for a really long time,
Oh yeah,
and
he's a
so
master.
like Police Story and all that stuff. Rumble in the Bronx, when that came out in the States, I remember seeing that in a movie theater, and my mind was blown. Like, oh man, this is like his first Americanized film. Not really, but on screens released in the U.S.
Right.
Looking back, it doesn't age particularly well, but
Like
uh,
most things don't from
yeah,
around
most
that era.
no. But like watching the action sequences and the humor in a lot of his Hong Kong films, like I want my son to experience that at the right age where he
Right.
gets it. but he's not going to start emulating it, you know?
Yeah. It's hard to find that sweet spot, and you're like, you feel like you're sort of like the gateway into the world for your child. You're like, I want them
Yeah.
to love all the things I do, but in their own way, and in a
Right.
way, almost in a better way. Like, I wish that I loved something in a better way than I did, so I want to make sure that I introduce it at the right time so that they can be a better fan of it than I was, because maybe I didn't get the point at a certain age, or I maybe took the wrong message from it, and just I learned later in life how to appreciate it more.
Yeah. I don't want to have to explain things.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, but I want to explain. There are things in films that I watched Karate Kid with him
Oh,
recently. And yeah, he's on the young side for Karate Kid, but um like look, Daniel is also at fault here, okay? It's not just the bad guy, the
yeah.
Cobra Kai guys. Yeah, they're not very good guys either. They're making poor choices. Daniel's making poor choices. But the only person in the film that's really like really honestly likable is Daniel's mom,
Right.
because even Miyagi's just like fucking around. He's messing about. Like he knows that this whole thing is karate training.
Right.
But like watching my son watch that movie at that moment in the film where Pat Morita, his Miyagi character is like, Daniel's like, I'm fed up with this. I've been doing all this work, and you got to train me doing karate. And then when Mr. Miyagi does the big reveal, like, I
Right.
have been training you. My son was just like, oh my God, he was training karate. Like that was amazing. That's what
That
movies
right
should do.
bright-eyed age, because at like 19, 20 years old, you're not going to get that kind of reaction, but like,
No,
because you pick up on some nuances, and you've had a lot more life experience.
yeah. And
um yeah.
at the end of the film too, the big culmination, like, Karate Kid is one of those movies where there's no like there's no speech, there's no like catch
Right.
up with him the next day. He's polishing his trophy. It's like he crane kicks him, the kid Daniel wins, everyone hoists him up, he's got a trophy, Miyagi nods, and then like the bad guy, the Cobra Kai guy, Johnny, is like, you did it, you beat me, you win, you're awesome. End of movie. You know,
Right.
it was like so fast, abrupt from climax of the film, boom, end of the film. And I think that's something that we don't have a lot of anymore in film.
No, we don't. So I have a couple more questions. These are a
Yeah,
little more indulgent on my end.
sure.
So the Dr. Moley voice, I was curious if that was at all inspired by Droopy the dog,
Yes. Yeah, it
because
was.
it's like as soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh, boy, here we go again.
Yes. I didn't watch a ton of cartoons like that. Is Droopy Dog, is that Tex?
It's
That's
Looney
not
Tunes,
Tex.
I believe.
Looney Tunes. I didn't watch a ton of it, so I didn't see a lot of it. But I wanted that character. That character first appeared in a short film, a sketch that a friend of mine wrote, and I forget what it was called, but the essence of this thing was that I liked ice cream bars, and I ate them really too fast. Like, it's this bizarre thing, but thick glasses, guy who talks like this, and doesn't make eye contact, that sort of thing. It wasn't long after we filmed that, then, that we ended up doing that for Dr. Moley. And somewhere in the midst of all of that, somebody brought Trailer Park Boys to my attention, and they were like, you're clearly doing Bubbles. And I'm like, I clearly didn't know who Bubbles was until like 5 minutes ago. So that's also kind of a difficult thing too in comedy, where you tell a joke and somebody's like, oh, that joke, somebody else told a joke, and it's like, well, there's always a chance I might have seen that joke or heard that
there's
joke.
there's a huge thing in comedy about that,
Yeah.
especially right now. The the debate whether it's joke stealing or parallel thought.
I think in a lot of cases it's parallel thought. When it's joke stealing,
More
yeah,
so parallel thought. I think joke stealing is like, it's pretty obvious when someone is stealing a joke because the beat, the way that they're beating it out, the specificity of certain parts of it, because you can, work a joke around, but the essence of it is still going to be the same. And
yeah,
if you keep certain like markers of it, like, all right, they took that joke, disassembled it, and then reassembled it this way, as
right.
opposed to just an original take on the same material.
And I think anybody who like realizes, oh crap, I am too adjacent to that other stuff, like you'll shift gears and you'll come up with something else.
You
If
have to
that's
adapt, yeah.
yeah, if that's within your skill set, you'll create new stuff, out of respect or just because you don't want
Because
to.
if you think about it, if you had the talent to come up with something that a comedian that you admire came up with without even seeing it, you have the talent to come up with material that they haven't done before. It's like the spark
Right.
is there. It's just
Yeah.
a matter of having that confidence in yourself to,
Yeah.
seek out doing those things. And I have to bring it back to the trailer park episode because
Okay.
I know we talked about during FolksCon, but you said one of my favorite quotes of all time, which was "Bees in your eyes tonight." Dick Cheney says it's going to be all right with bees in your eyes tonight. And I want to know if, like, I know you have no idea what that means or why you said it, but if you had to guess as to what George W. Bush was talking about or why he would give that advice.
Look, sometimes when you're coming up with motivational speeches, you just think of a word or a phrase and you just say it in the moment. And I think that's what happened. I think I just
The
came up with a line.
alcohol was the motivator,
I
and you
think,
happen to be doing George W. Bush, and you're just like, I'm just gonna say things.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it just, we do a lot of Rolfing on the show, and I think
Oh yeah,
that was probably, similar to Rolfing, where I just had this phrase in my head, and then I said it, and then I had to like finish the refrain or
yeah.
whatever it was.
And
Uh,
you made it rhyme, and it was beautiful poetry.
and I love it, and I can almost remember doing it. So,
And right before that, you went, "My mom's dead, my
oh yeah,
dad's
I
dead."
do remember that. I do remember that sort of drunken warbling. Uh,
Yeah, and you were like going like this as if you were trying to navigate through a dark room, and
yeah,
Craig is like holding on to you to make sure you don't fall down.
yeah. That's it brings me back to like, at what age should my children see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe right before they go to college. Maybe
Yeah.
save that one.
If you're going to make a jackass of yourself, do it with friends you trust.
And make sure it's funny.
Make sure it's funny and put it on the internet.
Exactly. Now, I mentioned we're going to do a little trivia game here. I just got 5
Okay.
questions. It's just going to be things that you've said in the show, and I want to see if you remember what they were.
Okay.
So, in the Justin Bieber game episode, you said that there were 3 things you knew about Justin Bieber. Do you remember what they were?
He's Canadian. Nope. He's Canadian. Was
The
one
the
of
three the 3 things you said you knew about Justin Bieber was that you love him, that
Oh.
you're going to marry him, and that you love him.
Oh wow. No, I don't. Update. I have not married Justin Bieber.
Do
I
you still love him?
do not love him anymore.
But do you love him? Because you did say it twice.
I don't love him. I did not marry him, and I do not love him. So,
It's good to have that update.
it's closure. It's good closure.
In the Black Stories episode, you told the riddle of the man hanging over a pool of water. We all know it. Standing on the ice block. After Dion answered, you explained the reason why he hanged himself. Do you remember what that reason was?
I don't.
He was lovesick because his wife left him for a milkman.
No, I don't
That's
remember
exactly
that.
how you said it. I had a feeling you wouldn't remember most of these because you were
No.
drinking and they're from so long ago, but I just thought it would be funny to see.
I might remember another one.
Ooh. In It's a Wonderful Life trivia, you described George W. Bush's sleeping habits. Do you remember what they were?
Uh, Sometimes I fall asleep against a wall. I'll just be walking and all of a sudden just conk right out. Is that close?
No, you said you're going to hang upside down in your gravity boots because the blood rushes to your head. It makes him get smarter every day, every time.
I don't remember saying that, but I like it.
And this last one, I have a feeling you'll know the answer to. So I need you to finish this quote from a receptionist from a job you used to work at. Give me back my shoes.
I fucked all you guys.
There we go. I knew you remembered that one.
Oh yeah. Yep. Boy.
And then last thing here, I just have a few fan questions. The fans had some questions for you. Some of them we've already addressed, so I'll just try to find from Sloth Jr.
Yeah.
The voice that has eluded you despite your efforts.
I have made several attempts. Well, I would say I've made a few attempts at Tom Holland, and he is just too young and
Yeah.
his voice is too high. Samuel L. Jackson comes up every once in a while, but that's, again, these would be for like film trailer, like for exact matches, not necessarily for like for fun or for humor and
Right.
entertainment. Tom Hanks also in that stack. Yeah.
Those are tough ones.
Yeah.
This one, I'm going to read it exactly the way it's written because I think it's funny.
Okay.
Do you ever feel like there was an opportunity in your life that you said no to and later regretted? They spelled
Yes.
it wrong, and instead of fixing it, they just wrote regretted after.
Good. Yes. No regrets.
No regrets.
No regrets. Ragri. I have one that shortly before I moved where I live now, I was contacted by the casting folks at America's Got Talent, and they walked me through. Essentially, they were like, check out Melissa Villaseñor, who's now, I think she's still on Saturday Night Live.
Oh, she's great. I love her.
Check her audition video and her videos out. Make one like that, and send it to us. So I sent it to him. Aaron Yonda helped me make it, and it wasn't just like hers. I mean, I kind of riffed. I in a way, like the first video I made, I was trying to do some sort of act, but I don't. That's not me. It's not what I do.
Right.
So then the second video I made, because even they were like, yeah, this just doesn't seem right for you. And they were like, how about you do it again? Just do whatever you want. So I do it. They contact me back. They're like, you're in. You're in. When are you flying out to LA to be on the show? And I was talking to my wife, and we just found this house, and we were going to be moving. And they were like, we're not going to pay you like to be on the show, and you're going to have to be under contract with us, and there's like a few other things. I sent the contract to my management. My manager, she was like, my gut is saying don't do it. She bounced it off a friend of hers who's a lawyer in the entertainment industry, and the lawyer's like, why does he want to do this? Doesn't he already have like a career and stuff? And I was like, oh man, this sucks. She's like, yeah, don't do it because they don't offer very good terms. Like I'm like, well, it's going to help me. It's going to give me like a lot of exposure, right? It'll help my website traffic, and I'll make a living after that, like all the time. And then with the house sale and the moving and the building of the studio and all this other stuff, I just couldn't do it. And so I had to call it off. I had to decline ultimately. So that is a big regret, because that was the season that like Puddle's Pity Party was on. It was a really good season. And there was a mentalist on that season too. I forget his name off the top of my head. but I didn't do it, and then watched like that season happen. And it wasn't long after that that mentalist actually contacted me and had me record something. He didn't ultimately end up like using it or hiring me, but he at least connected with me, which was kind of funny. Um, and then recently, like right about March, April of this year, somebody from America's Got Talent contacted me again. And there was a brief moment where I felt like second chance. Like nobody gets a second chance at this shit.
Yeah.
So I gotta do it, right? But then COVID, boom, like they don't know when they're gonna be filming or how they're gonna film it or how it's gonna go or nothing. And I was kind of trying to communicate back and forth with the casting director. Like, what is it you need from me again? Like what, you know? But then they were just like, oh, look on the website. Goodbye. You know? So I don't think lightning's going to strike three times, even though there's probably like 2 more seasons or 3 of the show.
Yeah.
I don't know what good it would do me at this point either, to be honest.
You seem to be pretty comfortable with how things are going.
Yeah, I don't
I mean,
know.
you can always say that things could be going better, but
Oh yeah, I mean, look,
that's just life.
if I could spend, you know, my days playing with my kids, maybe recording some stuff and making dinner, like that's perfect. Like I love that.
Yeah,
That's a lot of privilege goes into that,
absolutely.
you know.
And that question was by Casey and Tessie Kempfelhuff. I did not say that
Ah,
earlier. This is from Graeme, Graeme. In an episode, you mentioned that you haven't been to a strip club since you met Matt. Have you been to a strip club since you met Matt?
mm, I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say I have been to a strip club since I met Matt.
Was it in Wisconsin Dells? I hear they
No,
have several nice strip clubs there.
they don't. They don't have several nice strip clubs. Do not exist. Um, I think that was probably right about the time that I would have gone to my last strip club. Would have been about 2001, 2002. Yeah. At that point, why?
Yeah.
You know?
I went to one once, and it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had because it was just really sad.
Yeah.
And like the only reason we went in is because we were in Baltimore, and these guys were like, "Come in, we won't ID you." And that was literally the only reason we went inside. And when people are begging you to go in and saying we will serve you alcohol illegally, you're not gonna have a good time. It's not gonna be a fun time in there.
No.
And it was called the Diamond Lounge. And the fancier they try to make it sound, the worse it's gonna be on the inside for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously I've told some stories about some of them at, you know, beer board games, but yeah, I've changed. I feel like I've changed a lot for the better in the last 30 years, 20 years.
I mean, hopefully we all try to
Yeah.
change for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And then this last question is from Leopold Steinmetz.
Okay.
He keeps on asking this for all the people favorite black metal band. I'm assuming you don't have one.
Um, well, black metal is a very specific.
Yeah, like Finnish, like taking
Right.
pictures in the woods during the winter.
Exactly. And, you know, so for me to say, like, well, I was into Typo Negative for a short period, like that,
Right.
nah, I don't think that fits.
Right.
But I was pretty sad to hear that the singer from Typo Negative died a number of years ago.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
So the question I will go with is Dr. Moley, my back hurts. What kind of pills do you recommend for it?
Oh, I'd say you take the red ones. Red stripies. My kids know who Dr. Moley is.
Well, I mean, at least he's a doctor. So
Yeah.
he's a somewhat good influence.
I like that they know who he is and that we have a medical professional when we need him.
Yeah. And he's in the family too.
He
Kind
is.
of.
Yep. Sometimes I put the glasses
answer.
I'll put the glasses and the lab coat on and walk around the house giving advice to the kids.
Oh my God.
Hopefully
like not terrible advice. Like don't forget to take your pills in the morning, afternoon, mid-afternoon, evening, and mid-evening.
Most of the time, it's just yelling at them, "Who are you and why are you in my house?"
Oh my God. All right. We're going to wrap this up, but thank you again so
Okay.
much for doing this. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thanks for having me, Mitchell. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for all of the laughs you've given us on beer and board games. You know, here's to many, many more. And I'm going to end the recording now. And thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good night.